I'm Sarah Burke, and this is the Women in Media podcast. You're not going to believe how I met today's guest. For maybe, I'm going to say 5 seconds in the elevator at a podcast conference. Talk about an elevator pitch. My guest today is a leader in the podcast world, especially when it comes to women and minority women. Paulette Erato is the woman behind Latinas in podcasting. And you do so many other things, which we'll talk about today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And it really was less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, like I feel like I was really confused in the elevators in the host hotel for most of the conference. And then I saw you at the end of the conference. You were actually on your way to the airport, just grabbing your stuff from your room. And I was like,
Yep.
oh my God, have we not run into each other? We should totally connect. So
We should. This is why you should go to podcasting conferences and talk to people, because you'll find your next guest.
Literally. So how long have you been in the podcast world?
I started my podcast in March of 2022 and went to my first podcasting conference that same month. So I had 3, maybe 4 episodes out. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I was still I didn't have this mic. I was using a condenser mic. You could hear the bus across the street whenever I recorded.
No.
We all had those early days, right?
Yeah.
And being at that conference was an eye-opener about what the industry looked like, because Podcast Movement Evolutions is definitely more industry focused. It's about the agencies, the brands, less so about the indie podcaster. But again, I didn't know that.
And
So
just
I'm
for
there.
a little piece of context, that's the conference that we just met each other at, but in 2025 in Chicago. And they do podcast movement usually in August, which is maybe more on the content creation side, podcaster side. Yeah.
Right. So the podcast that Sarah and I met at was in Los Angeles that year in 2022. And it was just overwhelmingly male dominated. There were so few non-white faces in the crowd. And it was shocking because the name of the city is in Spanish. So you would think just by proximity, there would be a few more faces that were, brown, if any shade of brown. And it was not that way. And it hasn't really changed much since then. We are seeing a lot more women in the space, which is always a great thing. I am here to champion the voices of women. And I love that that's what you do as well. But also women of all colors, sizes, backgrounds would be great too.
Yeah. Something I care a lot about. Even when I look at the different faces on my network, like I'm so happy that, I am starting to see some of those other faces be part of what you see when you go to the website, but it's not perfect yet. There's lots of work to do. Lots of work still to do. So I'm curious if you lived any sort of public life before your podcast. Like what were you doing before 2022?
I've had many careers, and like I gave a presentation really recently about those careers, and I'm like, I've always won awards in my careers, but not this one yet.
Don't worry, there's still time.
There's still plenty of time. I was a photographer straight out of college. And so always behind the lens. I was an event planner after that, and that was my longest career. That's where I was certified and played roles in leadership and all this, that, and the other thing. And again, you're kind of a behind the scenes person in that as well. I took up blogging before I started the podcast. It's a little bit more public facing, but the weirdest encounter I ever had, and that was due to, I had a food blog and then I had a sewing blog. My husband and I, we had just started dating. So we're talking like a decade ago. We're in a store. And Facebook, we were all very active on Facebook.
Where are you based, by the way, as well, with your husband?
In Los Angeles.
Okay. Perfect.
So we're in El Segundo where we worked, and this person comes up to us in a store because we had just started dating and the relationship was on Facebook. It was Facebook official. This person knew both of us as a couple because they were a Facebook friend. But I did not recognize the person in the moment when they're like, Paulette and Ryan, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. And I was like, who are you? It was this moment of like, am I being punked? Am I a celebrity? And I just don't know it. And So Brian and I looked at each other like totally bewildered. And then the
Yeah.
woman followed up with, "Oh, I'm in the food bloggers group." And I was like, "Oh, right. Yes, I know exactly who you are. You just need context sometimes."
Yes. Okay. So this was your first time being like recognized publicly.
Yes.
Okay. I had that at a gas station at a little radio station in, the middle of rural Ontario. But anyway,
Wow.
it's
Wow.
different when it happens, right?
Yeah. So I decided I didn't want to be a celebrity ever, if that was going to weird me out.
That's
So,
fair.
the public facing life. Yes, I'm the public face of Latinas in podcasting, which is a mission driven passion project for me. And I will stand up and I will represent all of my people as needed for that. But at the same time, I do really enjoy my private time.
At what point did you know that you wanted to start a podcast? Because I know that Latinas in podcasting is actually more of a community
Mhm.
than, I mean, it still has a podcast at this moment, but it's really based around creating community.
It is. It is definitely based around creating community. We don't have an official podcast. I have a podcast that's separate, and we encourage people in all areas of podcasting to join, especially if you feel unsupported and underrepresented in this space. The podcast idea came in November of 2021. I woke up and just in my brain was this idea: you have to get this message out. And it wasn't the message I am currently putting out. So there
Okay,
was a
okay.
pivot about a year into the process. But at the time, I just wanted the world to hear that we all have creative aptitude. We all have a creative spirit, and it's crushed out of us as we get older and go into, adulthood and adulting and all these other things. Our creativity is hidden, it's forced down, it's locked in a room, and we think it's childish to want to express ourselves creatively, or we need permission, or whatever, society has made you believe. And so I really started to think that this is my mission. My mission is to make everyone recognize that they are creative. Even if you think that you're super right brained or left brained, whichever one it is, you can also inject creativity into your life. And so I started a podcast around that, because the last name, Erato, is the name of a Greek muse. And so I called it
Ah,
the Maker Muse. And it was about tapping into creativity, and it was about burnout from creativity and all these other wonderful things. And after 12 weekly episodes, I was like, that was the goal, by the way. I was going to do one season, 12 weekly episodes, to see if I could even hack it. And then I did, and decided that I really, they teach you that you have to niche down and you have to create an avatar, and who's the audience. And I was like, well, I want my audience to be child-free Latinas. That's who I want to talk to. So season 2 was a bit of a pivot from that original creativity thing to talking to women who didn't want children
I'm going
and
to
were
stop you.
thriving.
Where did this part of the story come from?
Again, it's that these teachings that were given in the blogging space and in the podcasting space, they're absolutely the same, that you have to create your ideal client, right? And who do I know best? Me. What am I? A child-free Latina. And I was in groups at the time, like on Facebook and stuff, about being child free. And these things, these same themes I kept seeing come up about feeling undervalued by your family because you're not producing heirs, or, how do you have the conversation? How do you respond when someone's like, well, who's going to take care of you when you're old? And that is called a bingo. Like, we have child free bingo, that these phrases and questions that are repeated to us so often, we could play bingo with them.
Ah,
I learned all of that through my interactions online with other child-free people, but that wasn't necessarily my experience. No one has ever challenged me in my family about being child-free. Everyone's just accepted that this is who I am. In the same way I have curly hair and I'm right-handed. This is
hmm.
just who I am. And my parents have always been super supportive. My brothers don't care either way, as long as, I'm there for their kids, which I have absolutely every intention to be. And so it was never, I didn't experience that. So I was like, well, is everybody experiencing that except me? So let's have conversations about it.
Mm.
The big overarching question I have been asked by strangers usually is, well, what about your legacy? So that became the driver behind the conversations for season 2. And
Mm.
I had a lot of fun. I wanted to just create a catalog of examples of child-free Latinas who were loving their lives without any kind of apology, without expectations. They were just existing. They weren't necessarily waving their child-free flag either, but they were just existing in a way that is different from the traditional norm. And that is what eventually led to what the podcast is now, La Vida Más Chévere. And it's about designing your best life despite the cultural bullshit we all grew up in. So
Despite the
that,
frameworks,
yeah,
despite
yeah. So,
the societal norms.
yeah, it's about
Okay.
taking a real look at these toxic expectations society has put on us and deciding, does that work for me? And if not, why do I feel compelled to act that way or to be that person? And hopefully it's catching people early enough on their journey so they recognize they have choices.
Mm. What made you join one of those Facebook groups?
So I would say it started because I was trying to make a living as a blogger. So there
Mm.
were Facebook groups, or you would join someone's coaching and they would have a Facebook group. And then Facebook recommends all these other things to you. And here's the funny thing.
Right.
I wasn't actively looking for child-free like groups, but all of my friends in real life are mostly child-free too. So if we're Facebook friends, I guess, was able to distill that out of our profiles, even if it doesn't say you're child-free, and it starts recommending that. I was like, oh, okay, there's one dedicated to people who like to cook, people who like to drink and, share cocktail recipes. So I
Yeah.
would join those groups like that. And yet you still have the conversations around like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to get an inheritance because my parents don't think I'm worth it. And that's real. That really happens to people. I had my mom on the show to talk about it because that's
Cool.
wild.
I love that you had your mom on. So, okay, go back to the title. Will you say it for me again?
Yeah, sure. It's called, here. I'll show my
Oh,
T-shirt.
La vida me chèvre?
La vida más chévere, the child-free Latinas. It's not on the shirt. La vida más chévere means loosely translated because it's a Puerto Ricanism. Chévere.
Okay.
It means the good life. So la vida más chévere is the life that's that much easier, softer, cooler. It's just a chill life.
Yeah.
And I had a guest on late last year, and she's been promoting the podcast most recently because of what we have happening here in the United States.
Oh,
Currently,
I want
there's
to
the
talk about
idea
that.
the idea of a $5,000 incentive for women to have kids. And if you have 6 or more, like the Nazis, they will give you some sort of medal or something. And so
Oh my
she's
God.
been using our conversation as a talking point because we talked about this very thing about how motherhood seems like a scam. It's like the ultimate pyramid scheme. And we really need to examine how little society does for parents. And that was the whole conversation. Like there are
Mm-hmm.
and you're in Canada, so y'all have slightly different benefits than we do, more benefits than we do in that respect.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't have paid maternity leave, much less paid paternity leave, and all of these social safety nets that make having children that much easier to do, to raise a
Mm-hmm.
child. And if we don't have those things, why are we compelled to continue to create more laborers for the oligarchy? So
Interesting.
she's been promoting that conversation. It was a really deep conversation. She actually works for the federal government, so she has an inside track and look into what's
Yeah.
happening in this country right now.
Oh, I mean, I can just like hear, it sounds like your stomach's in knots about what's going on down there. And if I lived in the US, I mean, I'm still worried. At the time of this recording, the Canadian federal election, I'm not sure if you're up to speed, but it is about to happen.
Oof.
We're about we are, let's see, 5 days away right now. And it's not that, one candidate is a replica of, what's going on down there. But it's that there's potential for
Yeah.
things to go in that direction that has a lot of people really concerned. So, I'm just to like take a side step, but it totally has to do with community, I think, at the end of the day, because that's where many of us are finding our supports during these tough times in business and, personal life. What do you think the content creation community that you have created has become during this time? And I bet you it's changed a lot from sort of its origin story to today because of some of these things happening.
Well, actually, the truth is that while I bought the URL for latinasinpodcasting.com in March of last year, so in 2024, the community itself was built on the backbone of a virtual conference that happened in October. Our election was 3 weeks later. So
Mm.
that has always been part of the origin story or the DNA of how we came together, because we have 2 weekly events now, standing
Okay.
weekly events. We have a Wednesday co-working and a Friday coffee break. We call it cafecito because everything's in Spanglish.
Oh, I love
And
it.
even if you don't speak Spanish, you can join. And the very first meeting was the day after the election, which was a Wednesday. And I had an inkling that no matter which way it went, we would need a space just to be heard. And I
Yeah.
said, I have that capacity and that ability. If you want to join your community here that we created 3 weeks ago, uh, the space is here.
Yeah.
And so, of course, Trump was elected. We all know that. And the next morning, a ton of women showed up just needing space to feel like they were going to be okay before they went out into the world.
Wow.
And it was really moving because this was something they were creating. This was the community showing up, whether they needed support or could offer support. And that is, we were all under duress, and yet something magical was happening in that space where even if you were just there for a short time, you felt a little bit better. And
Mhm.
that really ignited the momentum to keep the community growing. On the day of the inauguration, we had another little coffee break. So people
Oh,
didn't have to watch the news if they didn't want to. And we could just, sit in this moment where
yeah.
the world hasn't yet imploded and just kind of hang on to
Yeah.
one another digitally, virtually.
So it's like a
And
Zoom type of format
yeah,
where, you guys
exactly.
can just ask questions, chat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly that. And
Wow.
so it wasn't built with the intention of having that in the background, but it definitely has been impacted by it. And we're doing the best that we can with what we have in the time that we have it. Things don't look great if we're really looking at,
Yeah.
at reality. But in the moments that we have to exist between now and whatever happens, we are allowed to feel joy. We are allowed to feel safe, and we are allowed to ask for help. And that's what community is for.
Yeah.
In January, my city was on fire,
Yeah.
and that was really, really scary. And thankfully, everyone that I know in this city was safe
Mhm.
from the jump. There may have been a little bit of damage, but no one I know lost a home.
Oh,
And
amazing.
the mutual aid and the community outpouring in the immediacy of all that, and while it was happening, was just another model for how we as a society can exist. And what I like to tell people is that our community is a circle. Most of society is built as a pyramid, right? You claw your
True.
way up to the top, but there's only room for one person at the top, and that can get really lonely. Podcasting is already lonely. Why would you make it worse for yourself? In in a circle, in a matrilineal circle, you can enter at any point. There's no one right way to get here. There's
Yes.
no up. It's all flat, but you can connect it to any other point in the circle as well, or to multiple points in the circle. And everybody in my community up to this point has really brought the spirit of sharing and connection and collaboration. There's no competition here. There's what I compete against gravity in the gym. I lift weights. I don't compete
Yeah.
with women. I don't compete with other podcasters. I see everything as an opportunity for connection and collaboration. And those are the ethos that drive the community.
Give me an example of someone in your community finding strength. Like, I hope that you can share maybe like a specific story. You don't need to give a name or anything, but just where you could tell that someone was feeling really low and the community's strength is what drove them.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to that morning after the election because
Yeah.
I was surprised by how many people came. There was one friend I had made in a different state. So and I didn't know them too well, but they came and they were crying. It was full on fear, anger bubbling to the surface, and they weren't hiding it, and they were allowing themselves to be vulnerable. And I don't know how many other people in the room they knew, but I knew them. And I realized that she was allowing herself to be vulnerable in this new space. And that was not something to take lightly
Mm.
because it's so hard to be vulnerable with strangers. I mean, that's one of those things that we're taught not to do as people. And so the fact that she let herself be and feel and experience all that publicly, well, not, I mean, it wasn't an open Zoom, it was a private group, but still
Yeah.
amongst near strangers, said to me, wow, it really made me open my eyes to how much we could offer. And she
Mm.
sent me a note after saying thank you
Love
and that
that.
she needed that. And man,
Yeah.
that's powerful.
Can you tell me about a time where you've maybe helped empower someone to use their Latina voice now?
That's what I try to do with everything.
Everything. Yes.
Everything. That's just the mission, right? That's how I
Yeah.
like move through life. I made an episode a few back that was kind of like an audio pitch of my community. So it was bridging my podcast, Latinas or La Vida Más Chévere, with Latinas in podcasting. And I asked my community, can you give me a minute of audio answering a couple, any one of these questions? Like, what does this community mean to you? What would you tell someone if they were asking about it, and what has it meant to you? And 6 members delivered way more than a minute of audio each. They
That's
answered all of the
amazing.
questions, and it's and that lives on, right? That's there for it's evergreen content, and it's kind of serving as this like membership drive.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled all of that audio and made them into individual snippets to post on socials, and it's just again that continued support of, if
Mm-hmm.
you want to start a podcast, if you're Latina or you feel marginalized, we are here to support you. And that's what everyone said. We're here for the support. We're here because
Mm-hmm.
podcasting's lonely. We're here because I don't, I'm tired of trying to find people who look like me. Some variation of those comments were made by everyone. And so it seems to be working.
Yeah.
This having this community, it seems that people are getting what they need out of it. And so I just keep trying to pour back what I
Mm-hmm.
can.
What would be your next dream, next step for the community?
Yeah. Communities are only as strong as the resources that they can offer one another. And the people in the community are great. It is a free community, though. So we don't ask for people to pay a membership fee, because one of the ethos one of the catalysts for me starting this was to lower the barrier of entry.
Mm.
And however, free communities are difficult to sustain because if you don't pay for something, you don't feel as invested for it. I'm not saying my members don't feel invested. I'm saying that they have a lot of things going on in their lives and they might have to pay more attention to the stuff they pay for. That said, I'm looking to bring in partners and sponsors who agree with the mission and want to help podcasters grow and share their voices. And, maybe the next $1 million Spotify deal goes to someone who is from my community, goes to someone who is not the vision that you see when you hear podcaster.
Mm. I like that too. And what about the future of your podcast? Because I know we talked a little bit about that offline.
Mhm.
Is that something you're okay with talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So Paulette the podcaster is also planning to become Paulette the public speaker. So I've been pitching proposals for conferences and things of that nature, and that's where we met in Chicago. I had just gotten off
Yes.
stage, and so I'm actually working on a TEDx speech.
Very
So
cool.
that'll be happening in the next year. I've promised myself I will have that set in stone by Thanksgiving for us, which is late November. I know for Thanksgiving for you is in October.
Yeah.
So by late November, by the time my virtual summit is done for the year, I will be on track to have that stage set. And then that's just a launching pad for all of the other things I want to do for the community, for myself. And then we can
Yeah.
just see where that goes.
Okay. And the summit, you should talk a little bit about the summit too.
Yeah, the Virtual Summit is a 2-day free conference. And the way that free summits work online is all of the content is available, let's say day 1 and day 2. Day 1 is available on day 1. You get to watch that for 24 hours, and then day 2's content becomes available. And after that, it's gone. If you want extended access, we have a very low ticket price for that. So the VIP pass gets you extended access for a year. So anybody who was who attended last year and wanted to continue going through the material, if 24 48 hours wasn't enough because there was about 19 sessions, then it was, I believe, $97. It's still $97. You could still buy a ticket and get access
Right.
for until October when we turn over the new content. So we had 125 people attend. So it started in March when I bought the URL, but a friend and I, who also hosts a Latina podcast, Teresa Gonzalez she hosts Latinas from the Block to the Boardroom. We held
Ooh, what a good name.
it's a great name. And she's
Yeah.
got a 20-year career in tech. She's up in the Bay Area. She is a kick-ass woman. I've had her on the show before. You should have her on your show.
There's literally a segment at the end. That's how I wrap the show. I ask. So we will come back to her.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Teresa and she was down here in LA for the podcast conference. And we said, let's have a cute, a little networking event. We'll see who comes. It was at Bar Magnolia inside the Figueroa Hotel, which used to be a YWCA. It was the only hotel in Los Angeles when it was built that women could stay at because women were not allowed to travel alone.
Right.
So they could stay at this hotel. So it was kind of symbolic for us. And 2 people came. 2 people came. Two local podcasters. We're very grateful for Carmen and Yovi who came. And then, to grow from that to 125 people coming to a summit just 6 months later was pretty rad.
Oh,
So I'm
I
very
give you a
proud of
round of
that.
applause.
Thank you.
So what do you think it was that happened from 2 to 125?
Oh man, I put in all the work, all of the tactics and strategies I had learned from the previous 10 years of online everything, blogging, podcasting, using other people's networks, getting on podcasts, running ads, everything. I poured everything I had into this. I worked nonstop, but I also had really great partners in the speakers. Part of that first year's commitment as a speaker was you were going to promote this because I don't have a list to
Yeah. Yeah.
large enough to make an impact like all of us together do. Again, it was that idea that together we will all win. And
Mhm.
so everybody who was chosen to speak agreed to that. They agreed to this is a collaborative effort. And we had a mailing list of 11,000 people when all was said and done through each of
Great.
them, right? So that and the messaging I thought was for new and early career podcasters. That's what I thought the audience was going to be. But then I ran a survey as part of the welcome sequence, right? Asking, how long have you been podcasting? And a significant portion had been podcasting for 3 or more years. And I
Ooh.
was like, oh, why does someone with 3 years of experience need to come to a newbie conference? Is it they want to make sure they're doing it right? They're
Mhm.
brushing up on their skills, or they're looking for community. It's all of those.
Okay. Okay.
So, as it turns out, all of us can use a refresh on our skills every once in a while, especially if it's free.
Oh yeah.
So they came for the content, they stayed for the community that came after. And they're still active. It's not like people have fallen off. They may not be active in the Slack every day, but I get the emails from them. I get responses. I see their opening emails. And so it's pretty rad. I got to say, I'm really proud that the space exists and the women that I get to hang out with every week, Wednesdays and Fridays, or whenever they come. We have a monthly workshop as well. It's so nice to be able to meet new people doing this thing and feeling like
Yeah.
we're in the same boat. We can speak the same language. A lot of spaces where that are run for and by women tend to devolve into a catty or competitive space. And the number one thing I am proud of is that this is not that we have very clear expectations that you come into the circle, not a
Right.
pyramid, and you come with the intention to share what you know and who
Right.
you have access to, because this
Yeah.
is about pooling resources. And we're not going to stand for petty pick me kind of behavior. I've been that girl
Oh.
in my early life, out of college, in college, in those early adult years.
Yeah.
I was one of those competitive bitches, and I didn't like doing that, but I didn't know any other way. I thought that's how I had to be, and it
I
was
get that.
uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable. I didn't like myself very much. And
Mm.
finally, I just got tired of it. And then I realized, oh, I could do things differently. And this is so much easier. It's nicer on my central nervous system. It's nicer to just connect with people instead of competing with them.
This is your full circle moment also,
This
right? Coming
is,
back to
yeah,
the intention of it all. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Last question before I get you to nominate a few women. I think you've done a lot of teaching in your community, coaching a little bit. What's something that you have learned? One of the most valuable lessons you have learned from being in that community?
I was just telling one of my members this. So the co-working, I borrowed that from other groups I'd been in. I found it useful, so I thought maybe our community would too. They called it body doubling, which was a term I wasn't familiar with.
Okay, so I'm
They're
drawing a blank. Please explain. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So they explained it to me is that they're neurodivergent. So they prefer having a partner that acts as an accountability person, and it helps them get tasks done. And I was unfamiliar with the term, and I told her, "You're the one who taught me this." And she was like, "Oh, wow, you didn't know that?" It's like, you don't know what you don't know. But it turns out that that co-working time is used for everything. Like, people are doing their taxes, somebody's writing a book. It's just whatever task it is you need to get done, you bring with you. It doesn't have to be podcasting related. So
True.
it was really cool to learn that. I'm learning so much more about neurodivergence in general.
I
And
mean,
so
how many of us are undiagnosed slash I just got diagnosed end of 2024
congrats.
for ADHD. Yeah. But it's so funny because that accountability piece that resonates with me for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm here to learn too. I think
Yeah.
that point needs to be driven home. In the circle, we all bring what we have and what we know, and we can also learn from each other. So I'm not the ultimate authority on
No.
Latinas, on
You're a
podcasting.
participant.
Exactly. I'm
Yeah.
I'm learning right alongside everybody else.
Very cool. Well, you should be really proud of what you built. And I
Thank
want
you.
to say congrats. It's amazing. It really is amazing. Do you feel satisfied from that first podcast movement evolutions in 2022 to today? You feel like you're seeing more Latinas in
Uh,
podcasting?
we're not seeing as many in at the shows, but we're seeing them in my community. So yes, that's definitely growing.
Good.
And talk about full circle moment. I walked into that space in 2022, not knowing anyone, not knowing a thing, carrying a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'd been in that venue as an event planner, but here I was,
Yeah.
something completely different, something I didn't know if I was allowed to call myself. And when I met you, I was a speaker on stage.
Yeah. I was a speaker for the first time at Podcast Movement in Chicago as
Yeah.
well. So I understand that feeling too.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Cool.
Love it.
Well, let's wrap this up with a couple women who you think should come on this podcast and tell their
Yes,
stories.
absolutely. Teresa Gonzalez, who I mentioned earlier, she's
Yes.
the host of um, Latinas from the Block to the Boardroom. Great, great podcast. I would also nominate Dr. Lauren Guerra. She's a member of our community as well. She hosts the Gold Hoops and Gods podcast. She's a doctor of
Ooh.
theology. And she's
Mm.
one of, Latinas in the US make up 1% of PhD holders. So super proud
Ooh.
that she represents us as well. I could give you a whole roster,
Got it.
but those two are definitely women I look up to as well.
Cool. Well, I may reach out for some connects if that's
Yeah,
okay with you.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'll send them an email just to get it started for you.
And like Paulette said, you do not have to be Latina to join the community, but tell people quickly where to find you and if there's anything coming up that we should know about.
LatinasInPodcasting.com. We're at Latinas in Podcasting on Instagram and Threads. Those are the only social medias I can manage right now. I'm Paulette Erato in all those spaces as well. And yeah, joining the community is free. All you have to do is subscribe to our newsletter. It's that simple. But we do ask that if you aren't a person who is considered marginalized, or you aren't a woman, or you aren't Latina, you recognize that that is who is centered in this space. And
Totally.
otherwise, everyone's welcome.
And do you have another event coming up in the fall?
We do. So the Latinas in Podcasting Virtual Summit second annual event will be October 16th and 17th. We're always looking for partners and sponsors.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Well, let's keep in touch about that. And all the links and social handles that Paulette just mentioned will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on the Women in Media podcast.
Thank you, Sarah.